Hello and welcome to Nana's Crafty Home. My name is Tanya. Today's tutorial is going to show you how to carry yarn colors in corner to corner. This is the third in my series of videos. If you have never done the corner to corner crochet technique, I suggest that you stop this video now and go check out my two previous videos. I have one for a basic corner to corner stitch tutorial. I have that in both photo and video form. And then my second video is how to change colors in corner to corner. So we're building on that knowledge today, and I'm showing you some tips and tricks in how to carry colors to minimize the weaving in of ends at the end. So I've gone ahead and worked a portion of this corner to corner here so that we have something to work with. And I'm going to have basically 5 main tips today on how to carry yarn and how that should look. My first tip is going to be that you only want to carry colors if they're going to be carried against a pixel block of the same color. So I'm going to be pulling in my pink color now, and I'm going to work the next 2 blocks of my graph in pink. But the block after those 2 blocks is going to be gray. So I'm going to want to carry that gray color over those 2 blocks, and you can carry your colors forward and back. And later on I'll show you how to carry your color backwards. But here I'm going to be carrying that gray forward 2 blocks. I'm going to take that gray and I'm going to snug it up, not too tightly, but we want to make sure that there's not a lot of loose in this loop here, because as we're carrying it, I'm not going to be able to tighten that up later. So you're going to want to put that over your hook and hold that into place as you're pulling in your new color. When you pull in your new color, you're going to work your slip stitch over that gray so that you can carry it easily. I'm able to carry that gray because I'm carrying it against blocks of the same color, so it will be invisible. So I'm going to work that first block, first pixel, and I'm working over top of that yarn that I'm carrying. I'm carrying that gray. And then for the second block, I'm going to be carrying that gray as well. When I do that and I work my slip stitch up here at the top, you're going to be carrying that gray up alongside of this block here. So your yarn is going to lay along that side as you pull it up. You don't want to pull it too tightly because you don't want to pucker your work, but you do want it to be snug so that it is not hanging loose. I don't have a big gap in my yarn back here. And you can see there is my yarn carry, but because I'm carrying it against a gray block, it is invisible. So I'm going to work that second pink over top of my gray yarn carry. And when I finish that second block of pink, I want to pull in my gray to work it for the next block. And this is where I'm going to want to make sure that that yarn carry is snug, but not too tight, because if you pull it too tightly, look what happens. You're going to pull all your work and pucker it all up. Don't want to do that. Want to make sure that it's nice and loose in there, but still invisible, not gaping. So I'm going to drop my pink. Now let's say the block after this one, so I'm coming in with gray on this one, but let's say I had pink for my last block. And I thought, I'm going to carry that pink. I want to carry that pink up there. What's going to happen? So I'm going to put that pink over top of my hook, and when I do my slip stitch join, I'm going to work over that carry, and then do my chain 3 and work my block over top of that yarn carry, just like I did before, carrying the pink. This breaks the rule that we talked about earlier of only carrying yarn if it's going to be touching a block of the same color. So I'm carrying my pink, but both of these blocks are gray. So you can see that pink, and where it's going to be most especially noticeable is when I pull it up to work that next block, because I said that last block was going to be pink. That's why I'm carrying it. So I'm going to pull it up with that slip stitch, and look what happens. You can really see that pink color. And the other thing is that this is the wrong side of my work here. This is the right side of my work. And so think of how visible that would be in my finished product. Not professional at all, definitely not a look I'm going for. So it would not be a good idea to carry that color. Instead, you would want to drop the pink once you've worked that second block. Pick up your gray, work the block in gray, and then you would want to bring in a yarn bobbin with pink, or if it were just that one box that we were working, just work your one box in pink and then cut and be done. But definitely don't carry that pink up to work that last box in pink. So we've talked about carrying colors forward. We've talked about only carrying over 2 to 3 blocks. And we've also talked about the importance of carrying colors if they're going to be carried against blocks of the same color. The next thing we're going to discuss is carrying yarn backwards. So in order to carry yarn backwards, and basically what that means is I've worked this first block in gray, and my next 2 blocks are going to be pink. So I had dropped my pink back here, and I want to pull it back into my work and carry the pink over those 2 blocks, which I can do because that pink is going to be carried over these 2 blocks. Both of these blocks are going to be pink blocks, and so that pink is going to be disguised in the carry because I'm working pink over them. If this block were pink and this block were gray, I would not want to carry that pink back because it would be visible right here. We would be able to see that yarn carry when I worked that second gray box here. But because these next 2 are pink boxes, I can go ahead and bring that yarn back and then work over it. And this is where practice is going to make perfect. Over time, as you work this technique, as you practice with this, you're going to get much more comfortable with pulling yarn backwards because it is a little trickier than pulling it forward. And the reason being is you have to have enough slack in your yarn in order to not bunch or pucker your work, and yet not have it too loose to where you have gaps in your yarn and you can see yarn poking out of your work. So there's a couple different things and tricks I can give you here. So I'm wanting to pull this back, so I'm going to pull this through on my slip stitch. And you can see here how easy it would be to not pull enough yarn because this yarn carry has to be worked over. This is where I'm going to work a block. So it has to be carried over here. Then it's going to run alongside of this block here. And then it's going to be worked over with this block here. So in order to make sure that I have enough yarn, especially at the beginning when you're not used to doing this, you can lay this flat or just kind of pull after you've done your slip stitch. Kind of just see where that yarn is going to fall. So I've got enough yarn to go over here. It's going to come along here and it's going to run along here. I might pull just the tiniest bit more to give it a little more yarn. And so it looks pretty good to me. And again, that's going to come a lot easier when you've done this a few times. You're going to get a feel for how much yarn you're going to need for the blocks that you're working ahead. You're going to go ahead and work over that carry, just like you did going forward, but now it's being pulled back. When you do your slip stitch, you're going to work your slip stitch over top of that, or underneath that carry, so that yarn is on top of your slip stitch, and then do your chain 3, and then work your last block just as you normally would and over that yarn carry. If you are just starting out with this technique at this point, look at your work. Lay it down. Make sure that this is not puckered. Make sure that this is not tight looking in any way, that this just looks, it's lying flat, it looks professional, it's not pulling my work tremendously. So I gave this enough yarn, and that yarn carry is going to be invisible. So that is how you carry yarn backward. The last tip I'm going to give you with carrying yarn in corner to corner and changing colors in corner to corner is weaving in your ends. Don't weave your ends in too soon. I know that a lot of people like to weave in as they go, so they don't have a lot of ends to weave in. And this technique, when you're doing color Graphgans, has a tendency of having a lot of ends to weave in. And especially with larger projects, a lot of people just like to weave in as they go. That is great, because then you don't have that hanging over your head for your project. What I do recommend, however, is to not weave your ends in too soon. I would only go back a couple of rows and work back. I would leave the ends for the last 2 rows and then work them back that way. And the reason being is if you've made a mistake in your Graphgan, and sometimes we don't catch them the very next row, sometimes it's a couple rows before we figure it out we've made a mistake in our graph, it makes it easier to rip out and go back. The other thing is that if you weave it in and you're trying to work over those ends, you might be working that end in a little bit tightly, which can then cause puckering of your work again. So just don't weave them in too soon. Go ahead and work a couple rows ahead and then come back and weave in the ends from prior to those previous 2 rows. I hope you have enjoyed this tutorial today. Please remember to subscribe to my YouTube channel so that you get notified whenever I post a new video. If you would like to see the photo tutorial for this video, please head on over to the blog via the link provided below. If you have any questions, please give me a shout out. I'm happy to help in any way. I do have a new video that is going to be coming out that will teach you how to read graphs in corner to corner, as well as written row by row instructions. As always, thank you so much for being here with me today. Take care, everyone. Bye-bye.